I'm Imran Ahmed, founder and CEO of the Business of Fashion, and welcome to Drive, BOF's new podcast series delivered by DHL, where we hear the stories of fashion's most dynamic entrepreneurs in their own words. When I think of Warby Parker, I think of the word disruption and how it took outsiders to disrupt a long-standing business model.
The fact that we were outsiders to the industry in a lot of ways, I think was actually super helpful and beneficial, because most people that we talked to that had years or decades of experience, their first reaction was always to tell us why this idea would never work. Really, we were forging our own way and really thought about what's going to make most sense for our customers and the other stakeholders that we care about and the broader community that we wanted to positively impact. Purely from a business perspective, we feel like the bigger we get, the bigger the ultimate opportunity we see in front of us is, and we feel like we're just scratching the surface in terms of what Warby Parker could become.
For this episode, BOF's chief correspondent in New York, Lauren Sherman, sits down with founders Dave Gilboa and Neil Blumenthal to learn what it really takes to build a global fashion business from scratch.
So thanks, guys, for being here. It's really nice to be in the Warby Parker library.
Thanks for having us.
So I guess to start, before we get into Warby, can you talk a little bit about how you met and how you guys know each other?
Sure. So we met at business school. I think in the first week of school at Wharton, we were getting our MBAs, and there's a month really called preterm before school starts, and we just became friends socially, along with Jeff and Andy, our other two co-founders.
And they talk a lot about, there was always 4 co-founders or 2 co-founders and one goes away, and you guys are the co-CEOs. What's going on with the other 2 co-founders now?
Well, Jeff and Andy really haven't gone away.
Yeah.
They're still 2 of our best friends. They're on the Warby Parker board of directors. Mm-hmm. We were actually just texting with them, making plans for this weekend. Jeff runs Harry's, the razor business, and Andy started a venture fund called Elephant Partners. So he's investing in a lot of Warby Parker-like companies.
Oh, it's very interesting. So you're in business school together. You're thinking about entrepreneurship. A lot of people out of business school go into private equity or hedge funds or what have you. What made you decide you wanted to start a business?
Well, I don't think any of us went to business school with the idea that, in the first month we're going to meet good friends, come up with an idea and start a business. In fact, I think people that may think that they're going to immediately start a business in walk of life is just unrealistic, right? Good ideas don't come around that frequently. And this was really happenstance. The 4 of us were talking. Dave had just lost a $700 pair of glasses in the seat pocket of an airplane. He was traveling before school. Jeff similarly had some glasses that he needed to replace, but as a full-time graduate student wasn't about to go pay several $100s. Andy posited the question, why aren't people selling glasses online? Because all these other categories like shoes were moving online. Zappos was popular for the first time selling this category. Blue Nile was selling engagement rings. And I had run a nonprofit social enterprise that trained low-income women to start their own businesses selling glasses in their communities prior to business school. And in doing so, I had visited a lot of the factories where glasses were made. And here I was producing glasses for people living on less than $4 a day. And 10 feet away, some of the biggest names in fashion were producing their glasses. And, we got to talking about this, and it just didn't make sense why glasses were so expensive in the U.S.
Had any of you worked at an eyewear company?
We'd all been eyewear consumers. Mm-hmm. So I'd been wearing glasses since I was 12 years old, but I'd never stopped to think about kind of why they were so expensive until I lost a pair of glasses. And then, I just bought a new iPhone that cost $200, and I realized the new pair of glasses I was going to have to buy cost several times that, and it just didn't make sense. And knew that Neil had done something in the eyewear space, and we were just getting to know each other. And so I started talking to him about why glasses are so expensive, and he became really animated and realized that through his experience of working at running Vision Spring, this great nonprofit, that he had a lot of expertise around the production of glasses, knew a lot about the industry, and that's really kind of when we were all talking as a group, when the wheels started turning, and kind of the seeds that ultimately led to Warby Parker started growing.
So Neil, you had worked at Vision Spring, obviously, but no one in the company had worked kind of on the manufacturing or product side of the business, but you got to kind of know it better through that experience.
Yeah, when I was at Vision Spring, one of the things that we found was that people living on less than $4 a day in rural India and Bangladesh and parts of sub-Saharan Africa and Central America, care just as much about how they look as somebody on Madison Avenue. So I would actually go to the factories and basically merchandise and assort, and then eventually start to design sort of the glasses that I thought would sell best in these communities. So I learned a lot about that process. And on this nonprofit's board of directors, you had some executives from different optical companies, including one of the founders of Oliver Peoples. So that's how I learned a little bit about it. But it was really the four of us sort of, digging in and this is going to sound trite, but where there's a will, there's a way. And we just spoke to as many different people as possible to learn every aspect on how to run a business, from logistics to marketing to product development to web design, you name it.
And the fact that we were outsiders to the industry in a lot of ways, I think was actually super helpful and beneficial, because most people that we talked to that had years or decades of experience, their first reaction was always to tell us why this idea would never work, that people wouldn't buy glasses online, that you had to have brands and licensing fees, and there's a reason why that there were these middlemen, and there was a reason why the industry was set up the way it was. And so kind of coming at it from an outsider's perspective, we didn't have these preconceived notions, and we didn't have to operate within kind of this artificial construct that the industry had been created on, and could really forge our own direction. And so I think in a lot of ways it probably would have been detrimental if we had deep experience in the industry coming in.
You launched in 2010, right?
We launched in February 2010 to features in Vogue and GQ, and the company just took off like a rocket ship. We hit our first year's sales targets in 3 weeks, sold out of our top 15 styles in 4 weeks, and had a wait list of over 20,000 people. Those early days were quite chaotic.
So backing up and thinking about the actual business model, right now you ask any startup and so many of them will say, we want to be the Warby Parker of mattresses, we want to be the Warby Parker of jewelry, we want to be the Warby Parker of socks or what have you. But back then there was no Warby Parker to model yourself off of. So how did you guys kind of sketch out the business model? And I know Tom's was doing buy a pair, give a pair type thing, but there's so many elements to the Warby Parker formula. How did you figure all of that out? And what did it look like during that first launch period?
Yeah, so we spent a year and a half really working full-time, architecting every element of the brand, every element of the business, and realized that what we were doing was pretty complex. We were creating our own brand. We were creating an e-commerce site, so we had to sell directly to consumers. We had to set up the supply chain. Making a pair of prescription glasses is particularly complicated in that there's a prescription element, so there are doctors involved. After a customer places an order, we have to custom manufacture the product for every individual customer. And we wanted to build in a social mission, and it was as important to us as founders to create an organization that did something good in the world and that had positive impact as it was to kind of create an innovative business. And so we had a lot of complexity in terms of all the pieces that we had to start, but also the messaging that we had to consumers and understanding, do people care about, our buy a pair, give a pair program is something was really important to us as individuals and founders, and we wanted to help as many people as we could, but do people really care about that when they're buying a pair of glasses? Or do they really care about speed or fashion and design or price, and kind of how do we how do we force rank all those messages so it's not confusing to consumers. And so we would have sessions in one of our apartments. We were still full-time students working out of our apartments, where we'd be writing on the window and have whiteboards and really debating intensely individual words that we were using to kind of describe ourselves, every pixel that went on the website. None of us kind of had formal backgrounds in a lot of the things that we were doing, including web design. And so, but we all knew how to use PowerPoint. And so we would mock up our website in PowerPoint and print out pages and take them to our friends or to a Starbucks and put a stack of paper in front of people and say, imagine this is a website. Where would you point if this was the homepage? And then they'd point somewhere on the page, and we'd flip through the stack of papers and then put another page in front of them and see where they'd point there. And that was kind of our first UX testing. And so there were kind of so many things that we had to learn. And we didn't have a lot of models in terms of other companies that we could really take inspiration from. We were really inspired by kind of some big companies like Patagonia that really had sustainability built into their ethos, from Apple in terms of kind of their simplicity in design and UX, Nike from a brand perspective, Zappos from kind of customer service perspective. But really we were forging our own way and really thought about what's going to make most sense for our customers and the other stakeholders that we care about, namely the environment, our employees that we would eventually hire, and the broader community that we wanted to positively impact.
So if you're really crafty, you can create a set of fashion apparel samples for a few $1,000s, especially if you sew them yourselves. I mean, some of them, a set could cost $100,000, but you could do it for $5,000. But with what you guys were doing, making glasses, and then part of the original model was that you shipped 5 pairs to the person's home, right? So they could try them on. How did you come up with the capital? How much capital did you have initially to actually implement that first launch?
So we thought that we could start this business with $100,000. So the 4 of us committed $25,000 each. And then we sort of looked at each other and said, well, this might cost a bit more. So let's all commit. If we need to, we'll each put an incremental $5,000 on top of that. So we literally started Warby Parker with $120,000. And the thing about starting a business is that you want to de-risk every part of it. So what more information do you need to invest more time and energy into something? And we had gotten to a point where we felt like we could build a brand, we could design a collection we love, but the question was really, would people buy glasses online? And the only way to truly test that was to build a website and try and sell online. So with $120,000, we were able to design and produce our first collection of frames. So we had product to sell. We were able to build a website. And that's, as Dave mentioned, was sort of building very scrappy, where we were doing all the wireframes, even though we'd never built a website before. And then, working with folks to actually code it. And then the third thing is that even though this could to some extent be considered a test, you only have one shot to launch a brand, and particularly in the fashion space. So we hired a PR firm to help us launch with a bit of a splash. And for us, it was important to get that credibility, and that's why we wanted to sort of launch in sort of a men's book like GQ and a women's book like Vogue. And it was really funny. We'd been around the fashion industry, so we understood it to some extent, but we were still pretty naive. And we were told that we were going to be in the March issue of GQ, and it was February 1, and the website, like everything, was taking a little bit longer to launch. And we get a call from the fashion director the 1st of February, basically saying, "Hey guys, what's the deal? You guys are in the March issue. You got to get this website up. You said it was going to be up a couple months ago." And we said, "Oh, don't worry, we're working on it. It will be up by March 1st. And there was this pause on the phone, and she was like, you guys, the March issue comes out in February. You got to get this thing up. And that was, learning a little bit about Fashion Press. So we launched the website February 15th. We didn't tell any of our friends. This was right as the March issue was hitting subscribers' doorsteps. Some of our friends started calling us to say, hey, your website's live. And we were like, oh, yeah, if you wouldn't mind, maybe click through it. And if there are any bugs, please let us know. But then it just sort of took off from there.
So you sold out of everything very, very quickly, it sounds like. Did you start raising money immediately to keep it going? Because it just sounds like a very capital intensive business. Am I right? And I can't imagine you doing all of that stuff with $120,000.
So the most capital intensive part in those early days, in particular because we weren't paying ourselves a salary, we didn't have an office, we weren't spending a penny on marketing. Really, we were funneling as much money as we could into inventory. And being a small, unknown business, we really didn't have any leverage with our suppliers. And so they were demanding a significant portion of any inventory payments upfront by the time we placed an order, and the balance before they would ship. And so we had to spend a lot of capital before we could generate any sales. But as soon as we launched our website, we started selling a lot of glasses. And so there was actually cash coming through the door, and we were funneling every penny of that back into additional inventory. We had this wait list of 20,000 customers that we felt terrible that these early adopters, these people who believed in us for the first time, that we were disappointing them. And so we wanted to work through that as soon as possible. But at the same time, we had a really long-term vision for the business, and we wanted to make sure that we kept control of that vision and also kept control of the ownership of the company. And a few of us on the founding team had worked in consulting or banking or finance, and had seen scenarios where investors are not necessarily aligned with management teams, and that can create a lot of conflict. And so we wanted to have as much leverage as possible by the time we raised outside funding. And so we were incredibly scrappy in those early days. Neil instituted a policy that no one in the company could buy a pen because we could go to our local TD Bank and they had free pens there.
Those are some great pens.
They are.
And lollipops. They had free lollipops too, which was nice.
And we really tried to delay raising external capital for as long as possible until we had more momentum, until we had more leverage, until we could be in more control over those fundraising discussions.
So it was about a year and a half post-launch that we actually raised our first capital. And I think it's a testament to the faith that investors have had in us, but also the success that we were having, that we were able to dictate terms with investors, the fact that all four of us founders are still on the board of directors, right? And that we've been able to maintain control, and that we've been able to sort of cherry pick the absolute best investors and surround ourselves with people that really want to help us build a brand for the next 100 years, and not folks that are looking for a short-term return in 5 to 7 years, for example.
And those constraints, so not having any capital, forces creativity. And so we didn't spend a penny on Facebook ads or any kind of ads for our first 2.5 years that we're in business. And I think it can become easy. Now we see a lot of startups that raise a lot of capital even before they launch, and it can be easy to kind of get addicted to growth by paying for that growth. And for us, that was never an option. And so we just had to focus on offering the best possible customer experience. We viewed our customers as our best marketing channel, and really tried to think about how we can drive as much word of mouth as possible, and how can we leverage kind of existing audiences, particularly through press, that would continue to get the word out, but without us having to pay for it. And I think that enabled us to tell our story really authentically, and develop a really fervent following from those people that learned about us either through their friends that had a great experience, or read about our story in a publication that they trust.
How do you keep that up now? I was talking to a factor the other day who loans money typically to fashion brands so that they can produce a collection or manufacture something. And now they're loaning money to fashion brands for marketing online to acquire customers. And when you guys started, Facebook was, I'm assuming the Facebook ad wars were not as crazy as they are now. You probably could get a lot of marketing done on Facebook for free. Vogue, GQ, however, still great, are not the only way to market your business now, and perhaps don't drive the same kind of sales. How do you guys do it now and keep it feeling authentic when you're doing a mix of paid advertising and organic earned media?
I think, for one thing, for our paid advertising, right, how do we make sure that the key messages are coming through, that the brand is represented by its key attributes, by about fun, creativity, doing good in the world, through everything else that we do, how do we make Warby Parker something that people want to discuss at the dinner table? Whereas as we scale, that word of mouth is still a core part of our customer acquisition strategy. So this year, for example, we've launched 2 new sort of products. One is Prescription Check. It's an app that people can download and do a vision test remotely from their home or office, and then we can send them a valid eyeglasses prescription. Like that's pretty cool technology that is unexpected, that people do want to talk about, but it makes people's lives easier, right? They don't have to take time off of work, pay a lot to go have an eye exam. And if we keep doing things like that make customers' lives easier, we can keep that word of mouth. Another example is that we were one of the first brands to use the iPhone X's True Depth camera. And on our Warby Parker e-commerce app, you can scan your face and we can recommend frames for you. And where did this come from? These 2 products came from 2 customer pain points. One is not having valid prescriptions and it being inconvenient to take time off of work to go get an eye exam. And the second is that, it's often difficult to pick out the right pair of glasses. Most people buy prescription glasses once every 2 years. We hope people do it a lot more frequently than that, but they're not great at buying glasses. So we want to make it as easy as possible. And if you think back to why Warby Parker was started in the first place, it was to solve a customer pain point, to solve a real problem, our own problem of walking into an optical shop, getting excited about a pair of glasses or sunglasses, and then walking out feeling like we got ripped off. So at the end of the day, if we keep solving customer problems, we'll be able to continue to grow.
So when I think about your business, the 2 biggest challenges to me from the outside would be that there are just a few conglomerates that run eyewear, and I'm sure they're doing everything in their power either to buy you or make you go away. And then the other bit is the fact that there have been a lot of Warby Parker knockoffs outside of the US in particular, but I have even seen a couple businesses recently that have emerged that are kind of trying to do what you do, but even maybe go a little lower in price. How have you managed to combat those 2 issues, kind of the little guys trying to knock you off and the big guys trying to, quiet you down?
Yeah, so at this point we've had hundreds of copycats, both here in the U.S. and abroad, and most of those companies have actually gone out of business, and I think they've underestimated how challenging it can be to build a brand, and also how complex some of the operational issues around custom producing prescription glasses. There are a lot of the things that our team does on a daily basis to ensure that customers are happy, to ensure that orders are produced the right way and delivered in a timely fashion, that are much more complex than they appear on the surface. And I think just derivative brands that are just kind of clear copycats are not interesting, and there's so much noise in the world today that consumers are constantly bombarded by so many different elements that unless there's something really unique or interesting, it's not something that people want to talk about. It doesn't spread through word of mouth. It's not something editors want to feature. And so I think a lot of those kind of derivative brands have had a hard time kind of gaining attention. Now there are some internationally that in areas that we haven't we've chosen not to go into yet, that are gaining a little bit of traction, but certainly no one with a lot of scale. In terms of the really big companies like Luxottica and Essilor, the two biggest eyewear companies in the world that have recently announced that they're merging, their playbook has really been one of keeping high prices, high margins, and leveraging their scale. And they're continuing to do that, as evidenced by their merger, instead of really focusing on innovation and competing directly with us. And so we expect that they'll continue on that playbook. And there's going to be a huge white space opportunity for us. It's a massive industry. There's not going to be kind of one company, one winner takes all. We think we offer the best product for the best value, and that will continue to be the case, even though there will be options at lower price points and higher price points. We were very deliberate in that we wanted to offer a product that was a fraction of the price of what you typically pay in an optical shop, but we didn't want to compete on price. And even before we launched, there were a bunch of sites that were selling cheaper glasses that we think that customers have to sacrifice on quality and customer experience and design and brand. And we wanted to launch a set of products where customers got a great deal, but they weren't sacrificing anything. And we still see massive opportunity in front of us to just continue to focus on our customers and not really be worried about what any competitors are doing.
This podcast is delivered by DHL. As the logistics partner of many of fashion's biggest and most prestigious businesses, DHL is stitched into the fabric of the $2.4 trillion industry. Now present in more than 220 countries and territories, DHL has decades of expertise in logistics and is the world's leading partner for the fashion, jewelry, and lifestyle industries, delivering over 1 billion parcels each year. Drawing on its entrepreneurial expertise, DHL offers tailored logistics solutions suitable for any fashion business, from emerging designers to established global mega brands to independent stores, e-commerce giants, and direct-to-consumer startups. For more information about DHL, visit dhl.com.
So you raised that first round of capital a year and a half in. You've since raised a good amount of money. Remind me of how much exactly?
$290 million.
$290 million.
That's a lot of money.
So it's a lot of money. That makes your valuation extremely high. So you've raised $290 million at this point. You waited a while, a year and a half. It's been 8 years. So you've raised a few times over that period. What was that first round? What did you use that for? And what are you using the funding that you raised? It was earlier this year, right? To fuel. I'm assuming it's usually to fuel growth. That's the good situation, right? That you're not bandaging anything. You're growing.
Exactly. We're really using that capital to invest in the future. So a lot of that is to invest in some of the technologies that we were mentioning. So we filed a bunch of patents around our prescription check technology, right, where we're issuing people prescriptions remotely. We've now actually filed a bunch of design patents when it comes to eyewear design. We've been building out a bunch of stores. So it's exciting that we now have 70 stores. We'll have 90 by the end of the year. We never anticipated opening a single store. But at the end of the day, right, our model has always been around delivering exceptional customer service and exceptional value. And the way that we were doing that is cutting out the middleman. So not wholesaling our product to a retailer who would mark it up, but by designing and producing product and selling it directly. The internet and e-commerce was the cheapest and easiest way to have that direct relationship with customers, but stores is equally direct. And what we're finding is that, different strokes for different folks. Some customers want to shop and transact purely online, some in stores, some a combination of both. In fact, the vast majority a combination of both. So we've been using that capital to really create some long-term bets here. What's great now is that we've seen real leverage in the business and we're now profitable.
What was the moment when you knew you had to open a store? Was there a turning point? Was it that growth wasn't picking up as much online, or when did you realize, okay, we're actually going to have to do this? Because a lot of digital brands, especially when you guys were launching, or that launched right after you kind of said, I'm never opening a store, I'm never opening a store. Most of them have open stores. So when did you realize, oh, we are going to have that part of the business be a part of ours too?
For us, it was really a natural evolution of our brand, and we never thought of ourselves as an e-commerce company. We always thought of ourselves as a brand first, and we happened to launch using e-commerce because it was more capital efficient, and we'd bootstrapped the business. There was no landlord in the country that would have felt comfortable signing a lease to us. We just didn't have the balance sheet or the credit to be able to sign a 10-year lease, and wouldn't have been able to afford a build out. And so e-commerce was a way for us to reach our customers more efficiently. But as Neil was describing, as soon as we launched, we were overwhelmed by demand, completely stocked out of inventory. We had this home try-on program that we were super excited about, that we were completely stocked out in 48 hours of all our frames. And so we started getting calls from strangers all over Philly, where we were based at the time, saying, I read about you in GQ, read about you in Vogue, would love to come. There's a huge wait list. I want to try on the glasses. Can I come to your store? And we said, well, the store is Neil's apartment, but come on over. And we just laid out the glasses on the dining room table, and we found that people loved the experience. They loved getting to meet the people behind the brand. They loved getting to try on the entire collection. And we learned so much from those face-to-face interactions about which frames that people were drawn to, that they picked up, but then realized that they actually didn't fit them well. We got a lot of just great feedback about everything from web design to product design to what people were looking for. And then when we graduated, we moved to our first office here in New York. We were on 16th Street on the 6th floor of a commercial building with no signage. And we dedicated a couple hundred square feet to a customer showroom. And all of a sudden, we had hundreds of people a day coming into that showroom. We were making millions of dollars in sales from effectively a store within an office. And then that kind of any time that we had a physical environment for people to walk into, we experimented with some pop-up shops. We bought an old yellow school bus that we gutted and turned into a store, and that toured the country as a mobile store. And we found that we got a great response from customers. And so it was a natural evolution where we had so many data points from these experiments that it just made sense for us to then sign a 10-year lease in Soho on Prince and Green, on one of the most expensive blocks in New York or in the country. But we had enough data that we were confident that the economics were going to make sense, and it was going to be great for the brand and great for our customers. And it wildly blew out our expectations, that first store, in terms of sales and profitability. And so that gave us the confidence to then open a few more. And now we have 71 stores. We'll be at 90 by the end of the year, and really see physical retail as a big driver of growth and profitability for the business.
It's interesting. I feel like a Warby Parker store is now an indicator of a cool retail neighborhood, and I think there are a lot of fast followers following you guys into certain places. How do you manage that? Because if it's not a brand that you think is cool or you want to be connected to.
That's a tough one. I thought you were going to ask, how can we invest in real estate?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about real estate, right? That's the real business.
I think because we started online and we view ourselves as at the intersection of fashion and design, tech, sort of startup world, social enterprise, and increasingly healthcare with our prescription check app. We take a lot of the DNA from the tech startup world, and when you're writing software, you're doing so on literally like a daily basis. And the nice thing about software is that it's very flexible, right? You can change a piece of code, you can change something on a website in a couple seconds. The challenge with bricks and mortar retail retail is that things are very inflexible. You sign long-term leases, you spend a lot of money on build-outs, but our thought is, how do we inject some of that flexibility into our bricks and mortar strategy? So that way, if we are going into a neighborhood that's not known for retail, but it does super well, but then for some reason stops doing well, that we can leave and go someplace else. So we tend to sign shorter term leases than most large retailers. We try and design our stores in a modular way, so that way if we want to make changes to the layout, which we're doing constantly because we're learning, then we're able to do that. So it's really about flexibility.
So you've been doing this for 8 years. You're a really big company. You're just growing bigger and bigger. Not so big. Big for a lot of the companies I cover. But what has been the hardest part of all of this? Especially midway through, I'm assuming there have been some really big challenges. What have they been, and how have you gotten over those hills?
I think the majority of Neil and my job now is really all people focused, and just thinking about just ensuring that we're attracting the most talented people in the world to the company, that we're organizing the team in such a way that it allows people to have impact, that we're letting the people that are closest to our customers, closest to data, that they're empowered to make decisions. And I think there is a natural evolution in kind of any founder's journey where it becomes difficult to let go of certain things. Right when we were it was just the four of us working out of our apartments, we were literally doing everything in the business, and then you hire people that are better than you in certain aspects. There are I think growing pains with any organization, and how do we ensure that we're investing enough in people and training, and when do you need to bring in experienced leaders for certain functions versus kind of investing in those early employees that are super talented and are figuring things out as they go, but haven't done what we're asking them to do before. And so I think most of the challenges that we've had are thinking about do we need to kind of create a new department? Do we need to bring in a senior leader for this new task that we're taking on?
You guys seem to work really well together in terms of finishing each other's sentences and kind of being totally in sync. How do you guys manage your co-CEOs? So how do you manage that relationship? That's a whole other podcast, but
Dave buys me nice dinners. We sit next to each other. So we communicate super frequently. We text, we call. Half of I think relationship management is communication, and we dedicate time to sit down, talk through priorities for the business, give each other feedback, make sure that both of us are really informed, and I think that's for a few different reasons. One is so that way we can make good decisions. Second is so that way, as our team gets bigger, we don't want someone coming to one of us and mom saying no and then going to dad. And I think the third thing is that continues to build trust. Human nature is often to assume the worst in people, and having transparent communication, helps mitigate all of that. And we also value each other's brains. And I know that if I'm sort of thinking through something, I immediately want to talk to Dave and hear what his thought is. And if it's similar to mine, that's very reassuring. Often he adds to it, makes it a lot better. And that makes for a really healthy partnership.
Mm. So down to business, international. I know you get asked this question all the time. Is it logistics? What is the reason you haven't gone international, and when do you foresee it happening? Because I'm assuming it will happen at some point.
One of the reasons that I think we've had success to date is that we've stayed really focused, and we tell our team that strategy is what we say no to, and it can be really easy to chase new shiny objects or chase growth. and that can work in the short term, but it tends to diffuse organizational focus, and that can lead to a lot of negative issues down the road. And we've seen so many brands and so many companies that have tried to expand internationally before they were ready, and have come to regret it, either because they're out of business or retreating from those countries, or realized that they really weren't set up for success. And same thing with launching other product categories or kind of chasing growth. I think we feel fortunate that we operate in a really big industry, and that's why we were attracted to this space in the business opportunity in the first place. Eyewear is over $100 billion globally, but over a third of that market is in the US, and so we still have a ton of room to run here. And we also have a very long time horizon. We want Warby Parker to be one of the most impactful brands in the world 100 years from now. So we definitely have global ambitions, but we feel like we have time to get there, and we want to do it on our own terms, not just because there is some copycat that launches in country XYZ, but we should be ready to enter these markets and do so in a big way, and we will get there, but just don't feel any urgency right now.
And I think sort of if you were to look back at what lifestyle brands tended to do a few decades ago, right, they were primarily wholesale businesses. So they were really sort of product designers, right, or apparel designers, and then they could wholesale that any place in the world. It didn't introduce that much complexity. But we don't necessarily view ourselves as just eyewear designers. We view ourselves as retail designers, digital designers, brand designers, ultimately experience designers, and we want that holistic customer experience to be phenomenal, and to do that right takes a lot of time and energy and mind share. So when it's time to do that, we're going to dedicate the proper resources, and it's not just capital, right? It's the mind share of senior leadership to do something really well, so that way we have as much success everywhere else in the world as we've had in the U.S.
So you talked quite a bit about what was driving you in the beginning to launch this. This series is called Drive. What is driving you now? What is keeping you in the office every day trying to get to the next level? What's the Warby Parker thing that is keeping you here and keeping you engaged and excited about what's next?
Yeah, so purely from a business perspective, we feel like the bigger we get, the bigger the ultimate opportunity we see in front of us is. And we feel like we're just scratching the surface in terms of what Warby Parker could become only in the US, not to mention that global opportunity. And so there is just a ton of room for us to continue to grow and execute on what we're already doing well, and then layer in additional innovations, whether that is using telemedicine to make it easier, faster, cheaper for people to get new prescriptions, thinking about new product introductions, expanding the number of stores, the number of customers that we're touching. There's so much more that we feel like we can do and we're best positioned to do. And so we feel a lot of responsibility on that, and our customers are telling us that what we're doing is great, and they're super satisfied, and we feel like we're putting great products on people's faces and putting money in their pocket, and so that feels good. But the other element is around our social mission, and that's why we wanted to build that into the business from day one, so that as the company gets bigger, our impact gets bigger. And through our Buy a Pair, Give a Pair program, we've now distributed over 4 million pairs of glasses to people in need around the globe. And as we scale, that program scales, and that is really motivating to us and our team, and is the number one reason that people want to work here and want to work really hard here. And so, and that's just one aspect of our social mission. We've started a couple programs here in the U.S. called Pupils Project, where in New York and Baltimore, we're going into schools, working with government agencies and other nonprofits to administer eye exams in those schools. And for any child that needs glasses, we're providing them for free. We estimate that there are 200,000 school children in New York City public schools alone that need glasses, that don't wear them, don't have access to them. And we want to make sure that number goes to zero. And so it feels like they're in kind of everything that we're doing. We feel like we're having impact, but we could have a lot more impact, and that's super motivating.
Neil and Dave, thank you so much for being here. It was great to hear your story.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for listening to Drive, delivered by DHL, where we hear stories of entrepreneurship. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to hear more episodes, and give us a rating and email us at podcast@businessofashion.com with any questions or guest suggestions. To learn more about BOF, click on the description notes in this episode. If you've enjoyed this conversation, you might also be interested in BOF Professional, our global membership community, which keeps you up to date with everything you need to know about the global fashion industry. For a limited time only, we are offering our BOF podcast listeners an exclusive 25% discount on an annual BOF Professional membership. So to get 25% off your first year of a BOF Professional membership, click on the link in the episode notes, select the annual package, and enter the special discount code PODCAST2018 at checkout.